Ladies and gentlemen, now today I want to have a bit of an honest chat about my thoughts and where I'm at currently with 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross. And I know not all of you are going to feel this, but I just want to express my honest opinion that I'm just still really bored and burned out, and I feel like the content and kind of the general balance and shape of the game is just getting worse and worse. And it's just really like disheartening to see that I can't even like log into this game and have fun in PvP anymore, because like Purgatory Barn, I mean the one Escanor, you know, he went a solid way to removing about 50% of the fun in PvP. But Purgatory Barn just like removes all the fun in PvP, man, because he's so stupidly overpowered that you literally like can't run anything else aside from Purgatory Barn. Or else Purgatory Barn just absolutely wipes you, you know, he's going to get you down on a couple of cards, or you like just don't have the damage output to deal with the insane health pulls. Because even in ungeared PvP, you can get like 300,000 health on Purgatory Barn, and you know, even like best case scenario, dude, he ain't really dealing with that unless Purgatory Barn gets super unlucky. So I don't know, man, it's just like we're in the most boring PvP meta where, you know, there might be some counterplay with like the one Escanor or Ludo if you go first that does work if you do get lucky, but there's no more like interesting teams, you know, on the base of it. Sometimes there are rules like on the KR Japanese version that like massively stack up R or SR units by like 100-200% stats to make them competitive with just the insane base power level of Purgatory Barn. But also the problem is when it comes to playing Purgatory Barn himself is the team is just like really simple and really boring. You know, it's the most like basic meta that you can have in the game. You've got like, you know, you rush your ult on Purgatory Barn, or you draw enough cards to wipe the opponent's team. You've got your like drain on Eastern, your debuff removal. There's no like intense strategy or planning or like clever stuff that goes into it, and that's why I really miss like Gloxinia teams, man. Gloxinia teams are like Tarmiel and all sorts of crazy setups that we used to run. They were so much fun to play around with. There was so much to think about in terms of like your opponent counter playing your Glox's commandment, you sealing off certain skills, going for like ult control, damage reduction, you know, all of the stuff that you could potentially go for. That is my favorite team in the history of the game, which was Gloxinia, Tarmiel, Halloween Gotha, and Esterosa on the sub. But even when you had characters like Lostvayne Meliodas before Goddess Elizabeth, in that meta there was a lot of interesting counterplay, because you had to make sure that you either didn't crit Lostvayne, or if you were going to commit to abilities that had a very high crit chance, that you killed him, or else like everything would be ranked up and you'd be absolutely clapped. So even like Lostvayne was actually pretty interesting before the release of Goddess Elizabeth, but Goddess Elizabeth, the one Escanor, and also Purgatory Barn was just like a very steep downhill slope to kind of taking the viability out of about 80 to 95% of characters in this game, and just meaning that PvP is now just in this like very boring state where only like a team or maybe 2 or 3 are actually like competitive and viable, because there's no way that, you know, 90% of characters can deal with like a fully geared Purgatory Barn that has like 500,000 to 800,000 hit points. Even stuff that used to work in old metas like Diane Ult Rush, for example, where you could get the ult and health pulls weren't so crazy that you wipe everybody, or like, you know, Fest King quirky ult rush teams that we run in certain meta, again, just like they don't work out now, man, because everything is just on the base of it so overtuned and overinflated with Purgatory Barn. Like the damage got too crazy, and now we're at a point where the health pulls for Purgatory Barn teams had to get so crazy that they could actually survive against the stupidly overpowered burst damage of characters like the one Escanor. And we've just moved to this point where, you know, there's not really much fun experimentation in PvP. It's just like very dull, very boring, very underwhelming. Like one of my favorite metas, actually, I really like the Kingbrum meta, man, going back as well. The Kingbrum meta, even though Kingbrum, like the team of like Red Hellbrum, Blue King, and Red Gotha back in the day was really good, you still had interesting and balanced counterplay using characters like Liz Hawk, you also had like Arthur Ult Rush teams, and you also had Galland as well. There was thought that went into the design of PvP to keep it interesting and balanced, and made sure that everybody wasn't running the exact same team all of the time. And it feels like we've just got to a point where like the developers just don't care about like making interesting and fun PvP. I feel like we've just gone like full circle and back to square one of the game, but also at the same time made it like so much less interesting. Because I really enjoyed PvP when it launched, because it you know, shifted through a lot of very quirky metas very quickly. But now we're at this point where it's just Purgatory Bond, man. That's just the meta, and that's the way it is. And it just doesn't make it fun, at least in my opinion. And then when it comes to PvE content, you know, you've got all of these upgrades in 7 Deadly Sins. There is so much stuff to farm. You've got gear, you know, anvils and hammers to actually upgrade that gear itself. You've got UR gear. You've got all these events which give you various resources to level up characters, and if you're a sweaty tryhard, you know, you're farming the blue level 90 demon loads, and you're getting like all of this power. You're super awakening on top of that as well. You're doing like Tower of Trials, but there isn't really anything that big to work towards. I mean, the hardest content in the game is still kind of like Tower of Trials, but now we're like Purgatory Barn, a lot of festival units. That's not really much of a challenge anymore, and they're not making new Tower of Trials content. They're just like rerunning Tower of Trials stuff that was released about like 6 to 7 months ago on the Korean and Japanese version. And I like Tower. Tower's a good time, Tower's fun, but it's nowhere near like the challenge or like the excitement that it used to be in comparison. And the permanent version is just incredibly lame and incredibly dull in my opinion, man. I just haven't even bothered doing it because it just doesn't have like that excitement feeling of the original Tower. Like everything's got a fairly easy strategy once you figure out exactly how the fight works, but it just doesn't really feel like anything big or exciting to work toward. And in other games that I play, like Marvel Contest of Champions, for example, they've always had like this amazing progression path of you have like really difficult and challenging story content. Like every couple of chapters you're learning a new skill, and then you've got like additional variant stuff popping up where you have to use like different characters or a different strategy to overcome whatever challenge is in place, and there's really good rewards for that. And then you've got your like big endgame stuff like the Abyss of Legends, Labyrinth of Legends, which is like your crazy insane content for the sweaty tryhards. And all of this stuff kind of works as a big progression path to get better at the game, improve your skills, improve your character knowledge, like play around with different characters and different teams and setups. And I feel like 7 Deadly Sins like really doesn't have that. A lot of the content that they're putting out is just getting boring, stale, repetitive. The story stuff, there's, you know, it's nice to see the cutscenes in the story, but there's no like real challenge in the story, you know? It's like when, and I don't think there should be like a big challenge in the base story, because I think it should be like mainly accessible, but it would be nice to see like an absolute hell mode nightmare version of the story where they had like you know, some really difficult bosses or encounters for the super sweaty tryhard players. Because even like if I'm playing on my free-to-play account, there's no challenge in the game. Everything's easy. Like even on the free-to-play, man, I didn't really struggle like that much on Final Boss Escanor, but Final Boss Escanor, I got lucky with a few runs on the free-to-play. And that fight was a big challenge, but the problem with Final Boss Escanor was it was a challenge, but you also had all of this bullshit randomness on top of it, where Escanor could get, you know, like 2 gold cards in the final phase and just you know, one-shot character and like fully drain ult gauge, or like all sorts of crazy stuff could happen on that fight, where also like because he was getting like so many gold cards as well, his ult gauge would fuel up like crazy and you wouldn't have enough drains to control him, or you'd get unlucky on the drains as well. And I get like when it comes to boss fights in this game, there is going to be a bit of randomness on the draw, but Final Boss Escanor, again, we did a big video toward the end of that final boss talking about why that boss felt like BS for so many players, because there were a lot of points in the fight, it being a very complicated fight to learn, where you just get completely screwed over. And one of the big problems of Final Boss Escanor as well is it was, you know, 5 to 10 times harder than any other final boss, but you didn't have better rewards. And that's the thing as well, even when we get like a legend difficulty final boss, the legend difficulty king rewards were like, I think 5 to 10 times worse than your regular final boss, and it was a decent challenge, that one. It was alright, but you know, I really just feel like we're missing a form of content in Seven Deadly Sins Grand Cross when it comes to PvE. That's this really exciting thing to work toward and build on for the developers and the community. And I feel like without that, it kind of leaves everybody a little bit lost when it comes to progressing in PvE. Once you get to a certain point, you know, you've done everything in the story, and I get if you've, you know, downloaded this game in the last few months, if you're a progressing player, you might not relate to this, but I can bet my bottom dollar if you're an endgame veteran, you've been playing this game for about a year, it gets to a point where like everything just doesn't feel very meaningful in terms of like the stuff that they're putting out. And I feel like you know, the debut of Ragnarok on Korea and JP just didn't really address that. Again, it's a nice story, it's nice to have this thing in the game, but also like I'm looking for the real challenge, the real meaningful content, the thing to get stuck into, the thing that motivates me to get back on the grind, that also has some really good rewards as well. Because, you know, I've been saying this for months and months now, if you want all of the best rewards in this game, it's time to whip out your credit card and go into the shop, because they're not really in content. Like, you know, all of the best bundles and crazy stuff, man, is just via spending money in the store, really. So yeah, that's just how I'm feeling at the moment. You know, I want that challenge, I want that excitement back, I want some sort of diversity or interesting systems in PvP. I don't just want like, oh, here's this absolute god mode character that's just one-shotting everybody. Is there any counterplay? There's no counterplay because we made his base stats like 5x every other character in this game, so now 90% of characters are just completely irrelevant because of our poor balancing decisions. So yeah, that's just how I feel about Seven Deadly Sins at the moment. Again, I still think the game, like the fundamentals of the game, have so much potential if they really do shape it in the right direction and look at making some really interesting, engaging, well thought out PvE content, and also looking at how they can make new PvP modes of gameplay and new systems. Because the game is over 2 years old now, and they said in the last dev notes like a month ago, and we may find out more information on this tomorrow because I think there is going to be like a live stream or a dev update or something, but they've still done nothing to PvP. Like, PvP is still exactly the same as it was 2 and a bit years ago, and it's like, you know, one of the biggest modes of gameplay, and they've given it no attention. It's got no time of day, and it's like, I want to play a game where like they're actually focused on like balancing and kind of moving the PvP elements forward. So yeah, I just that's how I feel about the game. I'm just still bored and burned out, and I'm just not really inspired by any of the new content that they're releasing. It's just like very lackluster for the most part. So yeah, I feel like the game has a lot of problems it kind of needs to address and resolve to kind of grow and move forward. Can it do that? I definitely believe it can, but the developers really need to like address and tackle these issues head on, because I think for the really dedicated players and endgame whales and grinders out there, it's just becoming like very lackluster and very underwhelming, and there's just not really much to get excited about and sink your teeth into. You know, the Ragnarok banner came out, it was like, oh, okay, these characters a little bit cool for a day, and then it's like, oh wow, Purgatory Bond's super OP, and everybody's like immediately irrelevant, and PvE content, you know, isn't challenging enough that any of these characters, you need them, so they're just irrelevant as well. So it just felt like that. It just wasn't like, it just, the first Ragnarok update, man, I just felt was like, I wanted it to be like this big amazing event for the game, and it was really underwhelming, at least in my opinion, and it just didn't really bring like anything that, you know, meta defining or changing or moving forward. And maybe like future Ragnarok updates are going to do that, but yeah, I'm just looking for the big stuff, man. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, again, just a bit of a rambling video today, but I wanted to honestly communicate like where I'm at with Seven Deadly Sins at the moment. The game, it has potential to get back on track, but like I want to see them start adding in content that like really gets me interested and excited about the game. Content that is fun, challenging, but also at the same time has really good rewards and feels worthwhile and interesting to do. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, please do smash that like button and let me know how you're feeling about Seven Deadly Sins Grand Cross in the comment section below. Take care, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic day.
You are not subscribed to the whale sin of spending? Who decided that? Subscribe now, or enjoy the bitter taste of regret.